get knocked down, but you gotta get up, keep going.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. I have with me my friend Chelsea from Little Mountain Ranch. Chelsea, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
Nice to have you here.
I'm happy to
Um,
be here.
I'm so lucky because I get to talk to you often. I get to hear your story. I get to learn about your business. And I just love your story so much. And I think a lot of people love what you've created. They love your content. It's something that just feels really, really good for people in a time that is especially crazy. Um,
Exactly, and uncertain.
yeah.
Mhm.
Let's start off right away with an introduction. So your company, your brand is called Little Mountain Ranch. Can you tell people a little bit about what you do?
Sure. I can kind of start from the beginning and work my way to where we are now as far as what I do and how I got here. Does that work for you?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, Little Mountain Ranch is it started out as a YouTube channel 7 years ago. That's when I started doing it, and I started it with the goal of turning it into a business. When my youngest at the time was about a year and a half, 2 years old, and I knew by the time she was 6, 7, kind of school age, that I would be ready to go back into the workforce. I'd been a stay-at-home mom for a really long time at that point, and I had learned a lot of the skills that I was using in my life at the time. We bought a farm and we were doing all the homesteading things from YouTube. So the idea of starting a YouTube channel just fit really naturally because I had learned all these things and I thought that I could pass them on. I also thought that it was a way for me to do a business from my home where I did want to stay raising my kids and being kind of a full-time mom, but also have a business as well. And YouTube seemed like a really good option for being able to do that. And I think I was lucky because I got into YouTube. I mean, 2017, especially in the homesteading niche that I'm in, was just really starting to get going then. So even though I was incredibly inconsistent at the beginning and I was really just honing my skills and wasn't treating it as a business at the time, I was able to gain skills throughout that combined with an audience that because I just went really slow and steady, I developed a really loyal audience that was invested in my story. So when I was ready to go full time 2 years ago, it was exactly 2 years ago, just about to the day right now. I had this base of both experience and audience to be able to jump off from. And I knew at the time that I didn't necessarily want to be a full-time YouTuber, but that it was a great means to funnel people into what I wanted to do, and that was to create my own platform, my own website, my own membership community, my own courses, my own physical products. All of those things was where that's what I really wanted to do. And so over the last 2 years, that's what I've been doing is creating. So Little Mountain Ranch now is a website, a community, products, all of those things. And I feel really blessed to have been able to do that from my kitchen, which is basically what I did. And now we're supporting our family full time. So my husband is now home full time. He's been home full time now, running all the back end parts of our business and our actual farm, because we also have a farm and produce our own food and all of that. So he's been running that, and we've been able to support our family now off of this business. So
Wow.
pretty
That's
amazing. So
incredible. And you must have an incredible, I don't know if it's intuition. Like you said you started this right away as like this is going to be a business. I'm going to take this seriously. And 7 years ago, I don't think a lot of creators really knew what YouTube could be. Like you really got in there at a
at the
prime time.
perfect time. Okay, there was, I think, two things involved. I think there was just luck. Dan and I were talking about this yesterday. Dan is my husband. We were talking about this yesterday that it was a combination of luck and intuition because I could see the potential for it. I could see the potential for people, for the community aspect that kind of forms around a YouTube channel, because I observed that myself being a loyal follower of other homestead channels and knowing that I wanted to connect with them off of the main platforms that they were on, like YouTube or Instagram or wherever they were on. And so I had that in the back of my mind. And I know YouTube is a challenging business because it requires such consistency in order to build an audience on. And it's in some ways like working for any other boss, in that you need to show up, you need to be there, you need to be present. And I did want a little bit more freedom in my business. So I knew that that would be a great doorway for people to come into something that I could do off of that platform. Because at the time there was Patreon. So Patreon was kind of the beginning of that idea that people could pay for extra content from the creators that they loved. So I did start a Patreon at the very, very beginning, but then my mind was like, wait a minute, if I can, because you have to pay fees for those platforms, right? If they can create this, then potentially I can as well. And there were a couple of people that a few years ago started to create memberships, and we had there, it's a very open sharing of information, I find, in at least in my niche in this industry, where people are willing to share what they've learned. So I talked to a lot of people that had memberships before I started mine, and learned a lot first. And then when I launched it, I'm about 8 months, I think, right now into my membership community, and I had a lot of information and knowledge before I started, which is something I always really encourage people, like, talk to people that are doing it, go join other people's membership communities, like really research before you start yourself. And I feel like that benefited me a lot. That combined with having a good audience on YouTube that enjoyed my free content. And for those that wanted to dig a little bit deeper, they can join the membership.
I love how many old-timey skills you have, but also just such a strong, good like business
I
sense.
love technology. I mean, that's the thing. I love technology. So I mean, I live this really old-fashioned life, and I definitely am always called back to that in a lot of ways. And I have been somebody who's fought against the technological revolution that we're currently in a little bit, and kind of didn't want to jump on a lot of social media stuff and have some concerns about kids on those things and all of that. But also on the flip side of that, I have such an appreciation that all those technological advances in our society allowed me to do what I do now. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword for me, because there's a part of me that is apprehensive, and especially watching with what's happening with AI and all this kind of stuff in our
Mhm.
industries, which we can get into. Um, but I'm also so grateful, because I could never have done what I do now without that, without the all this technology that we have at our
Yeah.
fingertips now.
So why this topic? Why the homesteading and the canning and the preserving? Why was this the topic? Or like, were you already living this lifestyle way before YouTube was happening anyways, and then you just had an idea to monetize it? Like, what brought you into this lifestyle to begin with? And then how did you decide that this was the thing also that you could turn into a business?
Okay, those are great questions. It started as an idea. I've always been sort of not like a visionary, but somebody who has a very clear idea of what I want and where I want to go in my life. And when I was really young, I had some moments that set me on a certain path. Like, my family took us to visit a family who lived in a log cabin in the bush, and they homeschooled their kids. And I remember the smell of the wood smoke in their house when we opened up the door, and just the feeling of it penetrated my soul. And then my mom she always read us like Laura Ingalls and Girl of the Limberlost and Anne of Green Gables, and all of these books that were set during a time where life was made by hand. And
Mhm.
so that just integrated into my makeup. So I was definitely on the path of always wanting to have a farm and an old fashioned kind of slow lifestyle. And one of my best friends that I still know to this day, she said she remembers walking with me when I was about 14 or 15 down the road. And I just looked over and I said, I'm going to have a farm one day. I'm going to have lots of kids. I'm going to have a farm, and I'm going to have a big garden. And that's what I'm going to do. And at the time, I mean, I was a wild teenager, like a wild, wild teenager. So it was not at all, I was in like my Mac jacket, probably with a cigarette hanging out of my mouth and singing this, right? Like, not at all what you would think somebody like me at the time would have wanted. And then as my life kind of progressed, I went through some difficult periods in my teenagehood. And then my early 20s, my husband and we had our first child when I was 19. And we didn't have a lot of money, and we had to pinch pennies, and we had to, I'm sorry about the weird thumbs up on the screen. I gesticulate, so it's probably going to happen a lot. But I we experienced poverty, like not a lot of money, not a lot of food. And we bought our first house, I think when I was around 22, 23, something like that. And I just remember the strong desire to plant a garden, to get chickens. I got my first chickens at that age. So I've been doing this for a really long time. But the motivation at that point was to decrease our grocery bill, was to create some food security for ourselves so that we had food stocked up. My mom did always can and have a garden, so I had that kind of in my mind as well. And I also had the vision of Laura Ingalls Ma, with her big pantry at the end of the summer that was all full and stocked for winter, and they didn't have to go to the store or anything. So that was kind of in the back of my mind. So that's basically where it started. And then we kind of, there was a few times like we had to go live in Vancouver for school and live in an apartment, and we bought a townhouse, and we lived in places that I couldn't necessarily do that. But I always bought food from the farmer's market and canned, and like basically just started building skills. So when I started watching YouTube, probably around 12 years ago, that's when I was really starting to get into learning how to raise livestock and butchering and all those kinds of things. And I learned those skills from YouTube. So it felt really natural for me when I was like, okay, I'm going to want a career at some point outside of the home. I'm going to want to be doing something else. I was already doing all these things and had built all of these skills. And then watching people on YouTube teaching it, and they're such valuable life skills no matter what walk of life you come from, that it just felt like this perfect combination of need in the world for people to learn these skills, to have the same security that I had found with having a pantry full of food and just being able to stay at home, and the means to be able to do that with a camera in your kitchen. So it just sort of my whole life journey, basically from the time I was a young girl up until I started it, all sort of coalesced in that moment that I turned on the camera for the first time and said, "Hi, welcome to Little Mountain Ranch. My name's Chelsea." So it's kind of the
What was
journey.
that? What was the first video like? Did that feel terrifying,
Okay.
cringy?
I remember very clearly, I had walked down, we have a creek that runs over across our driveway, and I thought it was dead of winter, freezing cold in February. And I just thought it would be a beautiful place to have to film with the sound of the water in the background. And I remember, actually, to be perfectly honest, I felt like, yeah, this is it. Like soon as I started talking to the camera, I saw the person on the other side of the camera. Oh my goodness, I wonder if I can turn off the thumbs up thing.
That's okay.
But I just felt like I knew who I was talking to, and I knew that the information that I could share would be valuable. So it felt really natural to me. I've never really felt uncomfortable in front of the camera. I've just always felt really, really natural, and really connected to the people on the other side of it, which is a lot of the feedback I get from people when they come to my channel. I'm very casual. Sometimes I, haven't had a shower in 3 days because I've been out in the garden working, and I'm just like, that's the real life of my life. So I'm like that on the camera, and I genuinely care about the people on the other side. So there's like, that's the feedback I get, is I feel like you're like my sister, or you're my mom, or you're my best friend, just hanging out, and I'm hanging out at your house. So
Just casual, not scripted. And that first video, did you already have the gardens and the butchering, or was that first video like, this is what I want to do? I'm going to bring you guys along with me, or what did you teach in that first video?
I think it was more just, if I remember correctly, it was because we had only been living here. So we bought the ranch that we have. We have a 160-acre small ranch in the interior of British Columbia. And we had purchased this, I think, just under a year before I started YouTube. So there was a lot, even though I had done some butchering at that point, I'd been canning for years and years at that point, I'd been gardening for years, the building up of this place. We did buy a historic place that had some established, like we had an established root cellar and a garden plot, but the building up from where it was at, it had been abandoned for 2 years at that point, was the story that I told. So I showed the different projects, and it's really neat for me to look back on and see where we started. This little tiny garden, this little tiny pantry in my basement with just a few things. In my first pantry tour, on my channel is just, it's such a neat thing to be able to look back on the progression from that to where I'm at now, which
Mm,
is which is what I always encourage people to do, because when they sometimes I think when people come onto my content now, they're just like, whoa, like how did you do this? And I can go, you can go look back at the very beginning and see that it wasn't this at the beginning. Like my pantry, the
yep.
way it is now, was a long journey to get here. So
Hmm.
and because I want to come from a place of encouragement. And I find with social media, because you're jumping on people's lives in the middle of them, and you don't get a lot of that story that came before that showed how they got to where they are. So it can seem really like everyone's got it together, and normally by the time someone pulls out a camera, they're at the point of some level of expertise or experience, and it can
Yep.
seem like that. So I love having that reference. And even for myself, when I feel discouraged about where my own life's at, and I can look back at where we started 7.5 years ago now, I'm like, whoa, we've done a lot of work.
Yeah. And it started off with one chicken and maybe 6 jars of canned things in an
Exactly.
apartment. Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly right. It was, I mean, I was excited when I did my first 20 jars of canning, and now I can well over 1,000 every year. Like there's such a difference
Yep.
in that, and it's inspiring.
Yeah. And there are so many people turning to these skills right now. You're seeing like hashtag tradwife going around everywhere
Right.
as
I
well.
know I
Like,
saw that on Instagram
yeah,
or something. Yeah.
more and more women, especially wanting to be at home with the kids, but also wanting to cook and prepare and have some of these skills. Like I'm seeing it everywhere. Why do you think people are so interested in learning these quote unquote pioneer skills now?
I think there's a couple of reasons. I think there's the obvious one that the world is very unstable right now, and a lot of people feel that. And even if they're not the people that are choosing to watch the news and engage in it all the time, there's just a sense that everyone has that the world feels very unstable at the moment. And having food security offers a real tangible security, but it also offers a peace of mind, a psychological and mental security that I think people are really needing right now. I think there's also a secondary thing that we live in this incredibly fast paced world. And I think everybody's really tired. Like they're just like, wow, this is just everything goes so fast. And slowing down and making like an apple pie, it's almost like it's a meditative type of thing. It slows you down and you have a concrete result at the end that is just nourishing and soulful. Like all of us have had a meal that kind of touched our soul in some kind of way that someone made for us lovingly, or a memory from our childhood when we could smell our mom's, food cooking in the kitchen or whatever. And I think we're longing to get back to that place.
Mhm.
And what I try to do in my own life is find that balance between loving technology and all the ease that it provides me to do what I do, and to slow down and do things in a more of an old-fashioned way that feels more, at least for me anyways, it resonates more with what I feel like being a human is, which is being really actually involved in our lives with our hands and our bodies and our minds, and not just with our thumbs on our computers. So I think there's those two things going on at the same time, that
Yeah.
people just want to feel calm and peaceful. And I think that old fashioned skills bring that out. And even just watching other people do it can be very relaxing and calming. I hear that a lot.
Yeah. And I imagine on the farm, there's not a lot of time to sit around and scroll or play video
No,
games. There's
no, and
there's
it's
always chores.
distracting. Yeah, and the
Mm.
thing that I would say about physical work that actually directly impacts your life in some kind of way, there's something that shuts the part of your brain off that gets stimulated by social media or stressed, and it kind of just shuts it off. So you almost get a break. It's almost like meditation. I
Mhm.
find if I'm going out, even if it's really hard physical labor, like I'm going to build a fence, or I have to move cows, or I'm digging something in the garden, there'll be like 6 hours that go by and I don't even really realize it. And I didn't think anything during that period of time besides dealing with the task at hand, which I
Yeah.
think can be so good for us with our busy minds that are constantly being infiltrated with information all the time. I think just to
Yeah.
Whew, like that's what I think we need. And
Yep.
I think the lifestyle that I have, people are drawn to it because they feel like they could maybe touch on that. It's like we intuitively just know that going back to that on some level, I'm not talking about going back to horse and buggies and not having electricity and that kind of thing. I just mean
Mm,
getting directly involved with your life, with your hands, and doing
mm.
something that provides for your family in a concrete kind of way.
Yep.
That, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah. I don't know if I ever actually told you who my in-laws are.
I
They
think
were
you did. They did that Pioneer show or something.
Yeah. So they were on Canada's first reality show. They had to live like pioneers from the 1800s with only things, supplies that you would have back then. And they had to build a home, they had straw beds, they had to keep livestock alive and plow the fields. They weren't allowed like Tylenol or like it was 100% legitimate, only things that you'd have back then. And they both say that it was the hardest and best year of their lives.
That doesn't
That
surprise me.
simplicity.
Does
Hmm.
not surprise me. Dan and I, when we were first exploring this, I think about 18 years ago now, maybe 20 years ago, like the farm kind of life, not just the canning and the gardening. We leased an off-grid cabin for almost 2 years and like hand pump water, wood cook stove, no power. We had like four solar panels that ran like the lights at night kind of thing. And we obviously had more amenities than they would have had. But in looking back for me, it was a lot of work. I had to like hand crank a washing machine for laundry, and I had two little kids at the time. Like it was just, but also I look back on it as, and there's a lot of pride associated with how hard that was, and that I overcame it and did it. And that's something that I feel like maybe people are lacking. And you can get we'll just go back to the making an apple pie. There's something, so even if it's not the perfect apple pie in the world, but there's something so satisfying of seeing something concrete that was done with your hands that took work to do. And
Yeah.
that's what I felt like about that lifestyle, like the hand pumping the water, just the
Hmm.
physical work that was involved in it, just resonated with me. However, when Dan and I were looking at a farm, Dan was like, power is a must. And I said the same, because having to do what it was laundry for me, having to
Yeah.
like wash laundry by hand. No,
Yeah, no
definitely
thanks.
appreciate electricity.
No, I love me a dishwasher too.
You're right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, speaking of pies, um, I know that you still also get groceries, but yeah, you're making even the treats, you're making all the food. You're not adhere like there's a lot of talk about health right now, and you're not adhering to this like plant-based lifestyle. You have a large family, people are eating meat, but also like flour and sugar. But with the majority of these things being self-grown or homemade, you have quite a large family. What's the health like of you and your husband and your kids even eating like all kinds of food, but it being homegrown?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we had like a cobbler, which is basically a cake for breakfast this morning. So we don't shy away from the
Yeah.
sugars or anything. It's
Oh, wow.
actually, I think, about eating, like we don't eat refined food very often.
Yep.
We don't, the sugar that we eat is organic. We eat a lot of honey. The flour that we eat is organic and milled locally, things like that. Like we're very deliberate about the stuff that we eat, but I don't, um, I just don't, I'm just not that picky about like the sugars and things like that, because
Mhm.
that's actually not what I think is affecting our health. I'm no dietitian or anything like that, but I
Mhm.
think that the processed food, the lack of being outside, the lack of kind of having ourselves exposed to healthy bacteria and soil and things like that have a greater
Mhm.
impact on our health than eating, say, sugar and bread.
Yeah, I agree. And happiness. I think
Uh,
that's
happiness
a
is, I
big
mean,
thing
that's huge,
too.
right? Mental health is a huge has a huge part to play in everything too, of course.
You know what's funny is, I came from like a Eastern wisdom background, and s- not everyone, but a lot of the people that are in the business of mental health or in yoga or in nutrition, a lot of them are really sick all the time. And I wonder if it's the practices and things that they're taking on, or if it's actually maybe just an unhealthy obsession with self, like an over exaggeration on a focus of self. Whereas on the farm and with a large family, you don't even have time for that. You're like, we
No.
gotta go get the chicken eggs, we gotta make pies, we gotta clean the house. There
Yeah,
is so much to
exactly.
do
Yeah.
and less problems. So it's not like we should ignore problems, but I think the new way, the modern way, is a constant obsession with self, where the old way is the opposite. We're taking care of the family, we're taking care of everything around me, and nothing is quick and nothing is easy. Do you think that's good for us as human beings?
Yeah, I think that Dan and I have had lots of conversations about that over the years because it's not, I haven't always been where I'm at now.
Mm,
I have jumped on different, I was like a raw foodist for a while. I have been a vegetarian in my life. I have juice fasted. Like I've done all those things. Um, and I found that for me personally, like you said, it was like the obsession with self, but also just with the obsession with something that's not attainable. Getting the perfect diet, getting the a perfect amount of nutrients in your body all the time, that is a full-time job. And I
mm,
think focusing that much of your mental and physical energy on that, that's the unhealthy part. I think that I mean, an obsession on anything is never good, but that is so stressful. So like for me, if I look back on all those things, trying to grocery shop as like a raw foodist, for instance, it was
mhm,
just like it was stressful, and the amount of research that had to go into what could eat and how I could eat it and what times of day I could eat and all of that. I just find that yeah, it was too stressful. And so funny thing, I have a fairly big age gap between my youngest. So my youngest is 9, my oldest is 28. And my 4 older kids who are all adults, they when they were young, I was way pickier about the sugar, like
mhm.
way more. I was like the anal mom with the new kids, the first kids, and you're just like you want everything to be perfect. And they actually said that when they like graduated and moved out of the house, they
Yeah.
ate nothing but pizza and crap for like 2 straight years afterwards because they were making up for this lost time of, of having it so regimented when they were young. So we've completely switched gears. We even have Dan brought home the other day old-fashioned candy machines that he found on some like road stand on the way back from the Okanagan from this trip he was on, and he bought them, and I was like, we're putting candy machines in the basement, like this is this is like another level. I said, so I drew the line. I said, okay, you can do that, but not die, okay? Like I don't want
Yeah.
to die in the, so we actually have candy machines in our basement right now full of candy. That's all, it is dye free. So that was my line. But my older kids would be like, what? The fact that, so we have changed a lot. And I personally think that this offers more balance and less stress and more joy.
Mhm.
Because my goodness, we need joy in life. Like go eat the piece of cake, friends. Like maybe don't eat a piece of cake every day, but eat a cake, eat some cake.
Mhm. No, I love that balanced approach. That makes so much sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you mentioned butchering. I'm
Yeah.
trying to wrap my head around this. So, we're a hunting family.
Yep.
Dan kills all the big animals. I usually help with like the wrapping of the meat. I actually haven't killed a deer or moose myself.
Hmm.
I've gone out for birds. I've done a lot of hunting for birds, and that's okay. We've had chickens, and I remember when one was not doing well, and I knew I had to help him. Like that was so hard. Tell me about the process of getting used to butchering. Like,
That's a
was that hard?
really
Was that just normal as a farm girl? How'd you get into that?
okay. So I did have my dad ran a butcher shop for a couple of years when I was a teenager, and I went up and stayed with him for a while during that time. So I worked in his butcher shop, and I was never I was the type of kid who would push through even if I was scared or grossed out. Like I would just like push, so that I could be like tough or whatever. So I did that, but I found it was hard. And then when I started butchering my own animals, it was emotionally difficult. So I would like cry. I would kill the chicken or the turkey or whatever, and I would cry about it. Um, and that's definitely not the case now. So at this point, I have butchered hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of animals. But what I would say, and I've talked about this on my social media before, is that I definitely get like an overload at a certain point where I'm not sad, but I am kind of filled with just the awareness of how many lives. So for instance, when you do chickens, we
Mhm.
usually raise 100 chickens at a time. So it's not the same as when we're going to go do, say, one of our pigs. It's one, it's done. So by the 100th chicken, I
Yeah.
definitely have like a heaviness. Like it my just awareness of the fact that I am taking life is difficult for me, and sometimes I need to take a break after. And it's not that I have to take a break from eating the meat or anything, but I just have to take a break from doing any kind of butchering for a while to
Yeah.
just sort of let myself reset, because it is difficult and I am aware of what I'm doing, and I do it in the very best way I possibly can. We try to kill all of our animals on site in the field so that there is no suffering involved. Um, and I think maybe there might be a point in time when I choose not to do that. And if I do, I probably won't eat meat, just because I feel like if I'm not doing it myself, and
Mhm.
if I'm at that point where I can't do it anymore, I might not. But at this point, with the number of mouths that we feed in our family, with our lifestyle and all of that, it is the most effective, efficient, and also economical way for us to have protein in our diet. So that's where we're at. But I'm always compassionate towards people that say I could never kill something and I could never do that. I understand that. And I also think that if you're going to eat meat, being connected to it in some way, at least at some point in your life, like whether you go to a butcher
Mhm.
shop and you experience that, we'd eat a lot less meat in the world just naturally that way, because I think people
Yeah.
would probably eat less just in the awareness and understanding of it. Um, and I just think that there's a responsibility that we have when we're taking another life to be connected to that. Like when Dan does most of the actual killing, when it comes to the larger animals, he always thanks the animal for its life when he does it. And we have,
Mhm.
so there's a lot of respect here, and our kids are very respectful. But we also, this is a conscious choice that we're making to do this, and we're comfortable with it at this point. It's not easy.
No. Are some animals harder than others? And do you have to go in? Like, I feel like I would bond with my animals. We've only ever had chickens here,
Yeah.
and I've
No,
thought about,
I'm very pragmatic just as a person.
yep.
So I have fond feelings towards my animals, like my cats in particular right now. I have a lot of like I just love them. But I also have, and I my whole family's like this. There's just a level of detachment that's involved. And that doesn't mean that when something dies, there's not, especially if it's a pet, that there's not tears shed. But I think that the progression between that and kind of getting over it, so to speak, is
Mhm.
faster for our family, because we're so connected to it on a daily basis around here.
Yeah.
Um, all our animals get raised like pets. They all have names. They're all pet. They're all treated lovingly, but we're not emotionally connected to them in the same way that I think people that
Mhm.
don't live on a farm are. And that's very common, I think, for farmers.
I guess I do notice that with my chickens because we let them free range a lot and we live on an island. So inevitably, every single year, s- things get taken out by wild animals or somebody's dog. And like it was to watch that in the kids, like how quickly they get over things. They're like, oh, Mrs. Fancy Pants just got taken out today. Oh, oh well. And they just, like, they're starting
They just
to,
move on. And I actually
yep.
think, I've thought about this a lot, because we've lost family members in our family. And my kids, it's like their understanding of that death is a real thing and what it actually means, um, I think has created in them a really healthy understanding of like human loss, and being able to move through that with sadness and missing and all of that, but also knowing that
Mm,
you're going to be okay at the other side of that. And I'm grateful for that.
mm, that's
Having
beautiful.
compassion without being like shut off and detached from it,
Hmm.
right? For the animals. So
What kind of people are watching your homesteading content? Are they Are they people living in a city that are just really wanting this lifestyle? Is it people that are doing it themselves? A big mix across the board?
That's interesting. And an interesting thing that I've observed is that all I would say like 99% of the people that watch my content don't have a homestead and don't ever want to have a homestead. It's not like they're watching me for the farm. I would say the majority of them are there either for nostalgia reasons, like it's connecting them to the past, their own past in some kind of way, or it's the community that they're attracted to that's formed around Little Mountain Ranch, or it's that they want to learn the skills, like they want to learn how to can, they want to learn because even though we are kind of technically, I guess, a homesteading type of channel, we share just old-fashioned skills mostly. So I don't do a ton with my livestock. I do some.
Mhm.
They're always kind of as part of the story, but mostly what I'm teaching is how to take food and turn it into something that can go into your pantry. And then I also teach how to turn that food into meals for your family. And that is something that anyone can do no matter in what situation they're in. So within my membership community, I have people that live in tiny little apartments with a tiny little deck out front, and they're canning and they're growing herbs on their deck, or they'll buy their stuff from the local farmers market or even the local grocery store.
Mhm.
Like they plant garlic that they bought in the local grocery store in their little basket on their deck. So, and that's been an interesting thing for me because at first I thought, well, I would teach people like homesteading, or I would attract people that had farms. But it's not that. It's I'm actually attracting people that just want to learn how to care for their families, how to have food security. That's a big one, especially in this day and age. And not just that, food you can afford because inflation right
Yeah.
now, like how people are affording to eat right now, I don't even know. And so I can teach, like yesterday, I canned 48 jars of kidney beans. And the big giant box of kidney beans that I was like 25 pounds or whatever was cheap. And so now I have all this protein that's sitting on my counter. It took me a couple of days to can it all up. And that's something that's a practical thing that anyone can do no matter where they live, no matter if they're in an
Hmm.
apartment or if they're on a farm. And that's the thing that I think's been most surprising to me and also wonderful because it just opens up my ability to teach so many more people than just the people that are having a farm or a homestead.
Hmm. I'm already getting reminded of just needing to watch more of your videos because initially my canning and my shelf is all vinegar items. It's
Yeah,
the canned
normal.
pickles, it's the
Yeah.
canned beets. And I was looking at my shelf's getting pretty big, and I was looking at it the other day and I was like, I am going to be pickled if I just eat this stuff.
That's what
Um,
everyone that starts out does. Everybody, because it's
yeah,
the easiest stuff to do. And it's what everyone,
it
it's
is.
either that or jam. People will have like a
Yeah.
lifetime supply of jam on their shelf because they got into
Yeah.
canning and made nothing but jam for the whole summer.
I do have salsa. I have some salsa and I have some pasta sauce. But what are some of the other? So you mentioned beans. What are some of the other things that that you're canning? Are you doing like the pressure cooked meals where there's like
Yeah.
are you canning meat? What else are you
All the
preserving?
things. I wish I could bring you down to my pantry, but I am going to do a pantry tour in the
Hmm.
next couple of weeks. So I'll send that to you. But I can everything you could imagine from like pickled coleslaw. So coleslaw, like actually canning that. I do tons of meat, tons of meat. I make pulled pork. I do like pork and beans. I'm doing a tortilla chicken soup that I'm doing. I did a bean and kale soup the other day. So meals, right? Like so that you
Yeah.
can actually have, because here's the thing, I'm really busy. And the irony of my job is that I don't really love to cook. So this is what's really funny. People always find that entertaining. I'm like, I don't really love it. But I want to feed my family really good food. So if
Yeah.
I can do, it's a lot of work for me. Like the last 3 months have been pedal to the metal, working really hard, putting up food in jars. But when it comes to, say, my kids have a whole bunch of classes and then we come home and it's 7 or 8 o'clock at night and I want to feed them something good, I can go open up a bunch of those jars, throw them in a pot, heat them up, pull out a loaf of bread, and we're good to go. And I know exactly what's in the jar. I know exactly the nutritional content of it. And so I'm into the convenience food. I talk about that a lot. You can have convenience food and still have cooked from scratch food. And for
Hmm.
people that are working full time too, I mean, meals in jars is super easy.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about people's biggest fear when it comes to preserving, and that is
Sure.
botulism. I'm going
Yeah.
to kill my family if I do this. Now, the vinegar stuff is pretty safe. It is hard to screw that up. I mean, even my mother-in-law who was doing this Pioneer Quest, they didn't have a pressure canner. They only had the water bath, and she kind of rolls her eyes at some of the safety stuff because
Yep.
they were fine. But when we're talking about like meat, um, I have a sense that like if it were bad, especially when it comes to meat, you would know if it's bad. Are there instances where it doesn't look bad and it could have botulism as well?
Yeah. Okay, so this is a topic that we talk about a lot, like within the my membership and on my channel. I try to touch on this a fair bit because there is a lot of fear around it. And also there's a vast difference between the way North Americans can and the way Europeans can. Europeans don't have pressure canners. So everything they can is done in a water bath canner. They don't do a ton of canning over there either, but water bath canning is the way. So, botulism last year, I think there was around 117 cases of botulism in the United States. I only have the statistics for the United States. And out of those, I think it was only 4 or 5 of them that were caused by home canned food. All the rest of them were caused by commercial food.
Hmm.
So, the chance of botulism, if you can properly, which we'll talk about in a second, is incredibly rare. Botulism spores themselves are actually everywhere. It's the toxin that they release when they're in a low acid, oxygen-free environment, which is in a jar with a low acid food like meat, for instance, or potatoes or carrots or something like that that's very low acid. That's where it thrives. There's just an easy way to get around that, and that is using a pressure canner. Pressure canners freak people out, but fortunately, they've recently developed electric pressure canners, which are no-brainers. You press a few buttons, you put them in, put it in, and it does it all for you. I actually bought one
Mm.
just to test it for the people that watch my stuff, and they are fantastic machines. And they're a way to safely can so many different varieties of food. Basically, the only thing you want to stay from away from is like fats and milk and dairy and things like that in canning, but you can almost can anything else. And if you pressure can it and you follow the temperatures and the time and the weights for it, you're going to be safe. There's one extra thing that you can do if you have a worry about something. So your whole idea, you said, well, if I open it up, it's going to smell bad, right? But you can't smell botulism. However, if you boil the food for 10 minutes at a vigorous boil, it kills the botulism toxin. So
Mm.
that's like an extra. If somebody was really concerned about their pressure canned food or their canned food, they can open it
Yep.
up, boil it for 10 minutes, and then render it safe from botulism. But anything else you're going to tell, like if your food went off in any other way, it's
You
going to
would
be
know.
like the food in your fridge. It'll have mold, it'll smell bad, the lid will
Yep.
pop off easily, the seal will be broken or whatever, and you'll know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
You
did
don't have to
do
be
some
afraid.
I did do some soup with sausage in it last year, and it's been sitting on my shelf as like the backup if we're starving and it's the last thing left. But
Boil
now
it
I
for
know I
10
can just
minutes.
boil it. Okay.
Yeah, boil it for 10 minutes. You're good to go. Go for 15 just to be on the safe side.
Uh, Now, your content, what sounds like it's just nice and light. We're teaching people how to can and grow food. You've told me before that it can be really censored on YouTube.
Mhm.
Homesteading content.
Yeah.
Why do you think homesteading content is censored?
Well, I think that there's a few different things going on. So about 5 or 6 years ago or so, maybe it was like just before COVID, or maybe just after COVID, but there was just a lot of censorship kind of happening across the board on YouTube with all different kinds of things, like people that had their kids in their videos or people that had their comment sections weren't being moderated or whatever. And YouTube really cracked down on that. And then during that period of time, any videos that were butchering related or like showed anything to do with like meat cutting even
Mhm.
were being demonetized. So I had several videos demonetized of mine that were butchering videos at the time. And I kind of feel like everything got lumped in together. Like YouTube was just trying
Mhm.
to get on top of a bunch of stuff and just lumped everything into the same category. And that's kind of lingered over time. And I think also in the homesteading niche, there's kind of two camps. There's kind of the really opinionated political YouTubers that share a lot of that kind of content. And then there's the people more like my channel that are just sort of teaching the skills.
Mhm.
And sometimes with the censorship gods out there, all everything can be lumped into the same category.
Mm.
I have not noticed over this last year, and I don't know if other people in my niche have experienced the same thing, but I haven't noticed a lot of censorship happening, at least on my channel,
Mm.
which
Okay.
there shouldn't be since I'm talking about canning and whatnot.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is. I mean, the censorship thing is definitely just an issue across the board. There was,
Yeah.
during the COVID days, we couldn't even say COVID on our channels because even if we were talking about like health remedies or that's another thing that there is a lot of censorship on right now is anything that's like health remedy related.
Right.
So people just kind of choose their words carefully around when they're sharing certain
Mm.
things, like elderberry syrup, for instance, or fire cider or whatever, just not to use certain terminology
Okay.
because there is censorship there for
Yeah,
sure.
you're right. No one is free from censorship. People think
No,
that censorship is just applying to the cultural or political commentators,
no.
and it's not. It's everybody.
Yeah, 100% it is. Yeah, for sure.
So you have essentially monetized your life,
Yeah.
right? These are the things that we do daily. This is the dinner I'm cooking for everybody today. This is my garden. Um, for people listening who find that really appealing, who think, "Oh, great, I'll just start a YouTube channel." Um, what's it actually like? Because your channel is really successful.
Mhm.
I imagine that this isn't you just making a video when you feel like it. I've been working with you for a while. I know you treat this very seriously as a business.
Absolutely.
So, what does that look like to treat YouTube seriously like a business?
It looks like a lot of work. And this is one of the things I say to people because I do a little bit of coaching around YouTube as well, is that you really do need to approach it like a full-time job because it the way that the algorithm works is it depends upon consistency. So there's like no taking time off with doing YouTube. If you've set up a posting schedule, you really have to stick to that. If you even mess it up once, it can take weeks to recover your channel from it. So it is a lot of actual work, but even just the behind the scenes, like learning how to use the technology, learning how to edit the videos. A video on average takes 4 to 6 hours to edit, maybe takes 2 hours to film, 4 to 6 hours to edit on average, plus then just the management of the video once it goes up, doing moderating comments, replying to comments, all of that kind of stuff. So YouTube itself, and plus you need to continually improve on your craft because technology is advancing so quickly that you need to stay on top of the latest technology to help improve your channel, improve your sound quality, improve your video quality, all of that kind of stuff. So it's like YouTube itself is a business on its own. And then if you do what I've done, which is to create a business off YouTube, which is something I do recommend to YouTubers because we are dependent upon YouTube
Hmm.
for that. And that could go away anytime. It could go away right now while we're having this conversation. It could go away for it could be hacked. It could be all of a sudden they change the way they're paying us. All of a sudden they're changing the kind of content they're sharing, all of that kind of stuff. So you're quite vulnerable having your business exclusively on YouTube, in my opinion.
Hmm.
So that's one thing. So then creating the other business on the other side, which is website development, having to learn how to build an email list, which is incredibly crucial whenever you're building any type of business, period, let alone an online business. Deciding whether you're going to be running an Instagram account at the same time in partnership with your YouTube channel. And then what kind of business are you going to do? Digital products? Are you going to do a membership community? So in my case, I do all of the above. So it's not just me doing it myself. My husband manages all the books, everything on the back end. I have two VAs that work for me that help with sending out emails and handling everything that happens on the back end of my website.
Who does the editing? Because that sounds like the most daunting task out of
And
all of them.
I myself and actually my one of my kids
Okay.
does the editing of my channel. So I mean I'm fairly fast now, whereas before I say 6 hours, 4 to 6 hours, saying that I'm talking to somebody who's never edited a video before. For me, it takes more like two to
Okay.
4 hours, kind of in that range. So I'm fairly fast now. So
Oh,
it's all very time. It's a
yeah.
business, just like any other business. And that's something that I think gets overlooked because when people are jump on my channel and look at my channel, they're like, oh, she's in her camera in her kitchen, cooking in her kitchen, and
Mhm.
that's what they see. But there's this entire, that's like the tip of the iceberg of what Little Mountain Ranch, the business, actually is.
Hmm. Could someone get started without the editing? Like, could they just start putting videos out consistently? And when you say consistent, do you mean every single day, or could someone post, say, every Monday at noon? Would that be considered consistent?
So yes, there's two different things there. It depends on what your goals are and how much money you want to be making. So I post Monday, Wednesday, and Friday
Mhm.
every week, pretty much. Pretty much that's what I do. I have other friends who do every second day. I have friends that do it every day, and I have friends that do it only once a day or once a week. So it really depends on what your goals are. Once you've started to, so I have one friend that I'm thinking of who had an audience on Instagram. So she was able to pull from that audience on Instagram, start a YouTube channel, and get enough flow at the very beginning where Instagram or YouTube was like, oh, we're going to recommend her content out because
Mm.
there's a lot of people coming in out of the gate. And so she's able to do one video a week, and that's how much income she wants to make off of that, and continually grow her channel and get very good views on her channel. But she's kind of an outlier. I would say if you want to start a YouTube business, you should plan to post a minimum of 3 times per week,
Mhm.
consistently on the same time and the same day.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I don't think people really realize
No.
what it takes and to do it
Yeah.
well. Hmm.
Yeah, it takes a lot of time. And that's one of the reasons why, for me, because YouTube, I don't have any control over it, right? Like I was just saying, it could go away any day. But the other thing I don't have control over is that because of the way the algorithm works, if you miss a video for whatever reason, like I had one video about a week and a half ago that just didn't upload properly. And I didn't realize it till it already went up. And somebody was like, the last 4 minutes of your video are missing. So I had to pull that video down and put it back up again. And it
Hmm.
just like, I mean, it didn't tank things, but it just like there was a noticeable decrease in the income over those 3 days. And so there's no room for me to take time off. Like I really have to batch film and make sure that I'm filming for when I'm away. It's not like where you can get 2 weeks off if you are working for somebody else, and you can have your 2 weeks of holiday. With YouTube, it isn't like that. So that's one of the other reasons why I wanted to create a business off of YouTube, so that I could have a little bit of more control that way and a little bit more flexibility in my schedule.
Hmm. Okay. So YouTube pays you essentially per views.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's exactly how it pays. Yes. And there's lots of other ways to make money on YouTube as well, through sponsorships and product placement and affiliate links and things like that. So there's lots of other ways to monetize your YouTube channel, but it's still totally dependent upon extreme consistency. And if you
Mm.
mess it up for whatever reason, you will pay for quite some time. And that type of, I wanted to have the a little bit more control over my business by owning my own website and having a business off my own website, both
Hmm.
with digital products and with physical products too.
Yeah. And you and I have chatted, like you have multiple ways to make income, but at the same time, you're very careful not to spread yourself too thin.
Mhm.
How do
And
people
that is
find,
so hard to do. You know
yeah,
that because you and I are
yeah.
similarly tempered this way, right? Like we love all the things and to do all the things and to keep really busy. And I think with YouTube, it requires, or with a social media business, it requires a lot of self-discipline over your time, because there's always something new that you can sign up for or that you can do, or a new product you can get sponsored by, or like I don't even look at my business email where like the product offers and stuff go to. I don't even look at that anymore because there's just too much opportunity all the time. And you
Mm.
have to be very self-disciplined around your time. Otherwise, every second can get sucked into this business. Plus, it's fun. I mean, for lots of us that enjoy this kind
Mhm.
of work, it's really fun, but that can become an unhealthy thing if it just becomes everything, like your whole life becomes YouTube. And that's another thing that's difficult about balancing when you're filming in your own house and your own property,
Yeah.
to balance what is your life? What is content? Is there, you know, you start thinking of your
Yeah.
life as content, everything you do. Oh man, I should get the camera out. This is content. And that can do weird things to your brain. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It takes a tremendous amount of self-discipline. And I think just you understanding what it takes to be successful has really helped you perhaps put up those boundaries because yeah, you could make your way over to Pinterest and TikTok and bring on a bunch of affiliate sponsors, but you know that for any of those ways to be successful, it's going to require the same amount of effort. It's not just a matter of putting the YouTube out there, the video up there. It's
Mhm.
the editing of it, the marketing, the participating in the comment section. Um,
It's huge. And I think too, one of the other things that you and I have talked about before is like you have to be very careful that what you're doing is in alignment with who you are as a person, in alignment with your beliefs and your heart. And you can do things like we've talked about. I've stopped doing a lot of sponsorship content because it just was not resonating with me. I would do it and I would feel just awkward and uncomfortable and like this just
mm,
wasn't, and it wasn't even that the products that I was sharing were I didn't like or anything. It just
yeah.
didn't feel right for me. So I remember saying that to you and I'm letting go of them all and you were like, wow. Like that's because that's a big financial decision to do that.
Yeah.
But as soon as I did it, I just was like, okay, this feels
Mm,
more in line because you have to be so careful when you're the brand, when you're like when you're on
mhm.
camera all the time and to make sure that you stay real, stay authentic, stay who you are. And I've lost my way a few times, but
Mhm.
I think where I'm at now is I'm pretty clear about what I want, who I am, and how I want to put myself forward.
Mhm.
But it's a challenge. It's been a, you know, because I think when we first
Mhm.
started talking almost a year ago, I was coming to you from that place of being like, I don't know what my voice is. I don't know what I'm doing here. Like I feel
Yeah.
so imposter syndrome was really affecting me at that point in time. And I think I've really like walked through and worked through all of that.
Mm. Yeah, and simplified and through the simplification and really narrowing down on less, what has happened to your business as a side effect of that?
My business has, I was laying in bed last night and I was talking to Dan about this, just saying like, I, I can't really believe it. Like I feel I know the work that's gone into it. Like I'm connected to it. I'm conscious of it. I know what I've done. And but I'm also just in kind of in awe of the response to it and the fact that people are so happy to be part of my membership. That especially because I've been putting a lot of
Mm,
energy into that over these last 6 months, that people are so happy to be there and they are, and you and I talked about community and how hard it is to build community online. And that was one of the things that I wanted to do, but it was kind of an abstract concept to me of how that could look because we don't really think of online as a really authentic place to build community and real connections.
mhm.
But that's kind of what's happened. Like people are knowing each other's names and talking every day. And it's kind of like that we call it like the homesteading Facebook page, like the way my community runs is like there's always people on there asking questions and talking and not just asking questions, because I kind of thought it would be more of an educational platform, but it's more a place of sharing like wisdom and sharing successes like people's beautiful gardens or there's amazing
Mm,
thing one of my members just crested 300 jars. It's her first summer ever canning, like that kind of stuff. and
yeah.
and that is kind of I wanted that, but I didn't really know how it would look and I didn't even know if it was possible. And I think it is possible to do that. And I think the direct connection that I have, because I'm very involved in my community, but also we have weekly calls that we actually meet like this.
Mhm.
Like you and I have gotten to know each other really well, even though we've never met in person. It's possible, especially if the people that are coming into it are just authentically wanting to connect that way. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's been amazing. And I mean, my business from a financial perspective is doing really well too. So kind of like across the board, and there's these really great opportunities that I'm participating in that are just fun and joyful and not just about the money either. Like it's great.
Mhm.
I feel incredibly blessed to have this life and to have my business and my life be where it is right now.
Yeah, and you worked for it. And we were talking the other day about, yeah, building community is hard. And you have this channel where you give and give and give, like hours worth of high value content that people can take for free to then go and have a private paid community. Like having a private paid community is a big step for anyone. And I think this trips up a lot of people. Either they don't want to give free value upfront, like you do in the YouTube channel,
Mhm.
or they're scared to take that next step to paid, saying, well, who's going to pay me when I'm already doing these things for free? But the community is something totally different. Like tell people what's the difference between being just watching your content on YouTube and then being in the community? What's happening there?
It's a
Um,
conversation. It's a
mhm,
conversation. It's like it's a flow. So I've said this on YouTube a few times. It's very one-sided. Like I'm there
mhm.
presenting the information and connecting. And yes, there's the comment section, but that's very limited. This is a conversation. So, and your questions, those questions you have in your head when you're watching my YouTube video, like how did you do that? Or what was that, extra thing? This is a place that people can dig into it. So it's not a passive experience. It's actually like a what's the word I'm looking for? Like when two things are coming together. When I can't think about what the word is right now, but it's
Integrated. Well, and
collaborative,
it's live.
collaborative,
Yeah. Oh,
collaborative.
cool.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's the word. So it's more collaborative. So yes, I'm there, and a lot of people are coming there initially for that.
Hmm.
But it evolves very quickly after they've been there for a few weeks or they've met with me one on one or anything, where it's like this is collaborative and everybody's sharing information and sharing their special skills. I kind of thought everyone that would come in wouldn't know anything about canning or cooking from scratch and they'd be coming for that, but it's more of a collaborative thing, and that's something that YouTube can't really offer
Mm.
on its own. So it's been so fantastic. I can't wait to see what the next 6 months is going to bring with it.
Yeah. Well, and it's been a huge success because I think you're doing a few key things really right. One is consistently putting out free value, things that are really, truly helpful for people.
Mhm.
And the second thing is you as the brand, like building your personal brand. So by the time you do have a paid opportunity, people, they know you, they like you, they trust you, they know what you're about. You've already been giving and giving and giving. It starts just to become a no-brainer to take this next step in their
Mhm.
relationship with you.
Exactly. And I do it like there's definitely a staged process to it because I initially it was just YouTube and then it was developing the email list. And my emails are genuine letters to my people. Like I do one once a week and there'll be like a recipe or something that's of value in there that I'm putting in there. But a lot of the time it's just like, hey, this is what I was up to this week. What are you up to this week? Like it's really a letter to them. That's the approach
Mm.
that I take with it. So then I did that. And then I opened up my website. Come check out my website. There's some things in there. And then I opened up my community. So it was like a staged process from this kind of like one directional YouTube thing where it's me out to them to the emails, which they can write me back. And I get emails back all the time on my newsletter, and then to the membership community, which is where we can actually have like a real conversation. So I think it's been very intuitive, but I've also spent a lot of time like thinking about about this, like what's the best way to go about doing this and how
Mhm.
do I do it mostly, because I don't know if it's a flaw in my personality or what, but I cannot do things if they don't like feel right. I mean, I can fake it but it's like it messes me up. Like I can't, it has to be in line with something core in me.
Mhm.
So I did try to start a membership community maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago now. And I just couldn't do it because it just was not like I couldn't wrap my brain around it. I didn't have the
Mhm.
vision for it. Like the flow of the energy wasn't right. But now I feel like I'm clear, and it's evolving and changing because that's just what happens. Um, I often say that being an entrepreneur is like the best therapy you could ever do because it forces you to face yourself and face your stuff and evolve and change all the time. So it might change in 6 months, but right now I feel like it's all in a pretty good flow.
I love that. Chelsea, where can people find you?
at www.littlemountainranch.com. So that's my website. That's where kind of all my personal stuff is housed. There's also links there to my YouTube channel, or you can just look at find me at Little Mountain Ranch at either Instagram or on YouTube.
Amazing. Yeah, I highly recommend like to the listeners, go and see what Chelsea built. And if you are also feeling that like intuitive nudge that maybe you need some of these old-timey skills yourself, I know I've been doing this work for a while too. I think she's going to be the best one to teach you.
Thank you, Carla. You're amazing. And if you need business coaching, Carla's your girl. She's been mine for a year and she's incredible.
Amazing. Thanks for taking the time here with us. And yeah, everybody go check out her channel. I'll make sure everything is linked up in the show notes. And yeah, and Chelsea, thanks again.
Thank you. I really appreciate being asked to come here.
Been underground, now I aim for the sky. Don't quit now, you can last longer. All these wounds only making you stronger. Don't